Good evening, class. Tonight we're going to talk about that two-floor house that we started on last week. And we have a sketch here of what it looks like. So I'm going to do that first. Then we're going to do a quick stock list. All right, if we have the time, perhaps we can get into a wet vent, which would be a three-floor house. Okay, so let's see what we got. From here down, it's the sketch you had before. All right. The only difference is that we had to add vents on the first floor. Now, you guys are all tier 2, so you're all probably pretty familiar with the venting. You can't have anything come into the stack on an upper floor without a vent below. All right? So we took the stack vent, which was the floor, the only floor, or the top floor, and added a floor. An example of this would be if you had an attic on an old house, or maybe a couple of bedrooms upstairs, they put a dormer on and finished it and added a bathroom. I've seen that maybe a half a dozen times. It's not that unusual. And you have to put a bathroom on the second floor. In any case, this is a two-floor house, not a ranch, probably a cape, a garrison, something like that. And you'll notice that the bathrooms are identical. Okay, the piping did not change. The only thing we did is to go back to this floor, and I hope it's coming out green there. Well, if it's not, I put the vents in green. Each of the fixtures is vented. Okay, I'd like you to make a note of this. First of all, you're going to have this, I'm going to see if I can download just the sketch itself, but make sure that you know that this is an individually vented home. Okay, individually vented floor, excuse me. Individually vented first floor. Now, most of you that do new homes probably would have used a wet vent on this floor. We'll talk about that another time. Okay, so let's jump up on the top floor for a moment. The top floor is exactly what this floor looked like before we added the vents, okay? The lav, water closet, and the tub or shower. And remember, the lav is 1.5 inches. It can go up to 5 feet, unvented. The tub, same thing, 1.5 inches. If it was a shower, it could be 2 inch. Okay, I'm going to call this a tub, which means that this is 1.5 inch line right here. Okay? And this one, we could call this one a shower, which means this is a 2 inch line. All right. Now, the way I've vented the water closet here, it works great on paper all the time, but in real life, it'd be very hard to individually vent a water closet like that. I think all of you are probably wet venting off of the line about right here. But in any case, again, it works great on paper. Okay, the stack here, instead of going out the roof about where my hand is, we extended up and out the roof. And we did talk about this last class, but here you can see it again, just for your information. 1.5 inches, minimum to code, 1.25 inches. If you use what you normally use out in the trade, it'd be marked wrong. This, of course, would be 1.5 inches, and some of you are probably using 2 inch down here. Okay, as we go out the roof, I started to write it in, but it was going to get messy, so I didn't finish it. Don't forget, 1 foot below the roof, you got to jump it up to 2 inch pipe. Okay, so the 1.25 inches right here has to go to 2 inch, 1 foot below the roof. Okay, I'll try to slip it in right here. 1 foot below the roof, you'd use 1.25 inches by 2 coupling, according to this here. So it's going to look like a funnel, and up and out the roof. And out the roof, how much or how high does it go? Okay, don't forget, 18, 24. Okay? And of course, the same over here with the 3 inch. Now, do these, as I look at this here, it looks like it's a little bit different in the height. It doesn't matter. In real life, you could have a vent come out down here somewhere, right? If you had an addition on the house with a bathroom in it, some of you, I'm sure, have done this. If you got a stack that ends like a whole floor level below the other one, you're going to have to put a cap on the top of it and fill it up with either air or water. Okay, so if you haven't seen that, that's how we do it. Otherwise, if you leave the bottom one uncapped, the water will only go as high as the lowest stack, right? Water seeks its own level, so everything up here wouldn't be tested. If the inspector had a good eye, he could see that you didn't have it capped. But if you were using inflatables, he couldn't see it anyway. So be sure that you have a cap on any stack that's not equal in height. Okay, now let's go down to the bottom of the stack. Let's do a review. We'll come in from outside. All right, we have the building drain, and the building drain goes out 10 feet from the inside face of the wall, which is roughly 9 feet. And where does it go to? Well, it goes into the building sewer, which is right about here. You know, it begins like right here where that red line is, okay, and goes out. Okay, or it would be the septic tank. Now, if it was a septic tank, the septic tank would be right roughly where the edge of the board is here. That's where the tank would be. It's within about 10 feet of the wall, normally. And remember, the tank and out to the septic system, if it's in the country, we're not responsible for. Your only concern for the tank is the elevation. That's it. Okay? It absolutely has to be low enough for you to tie in. That's why, and I know we already beat this pretty hard. Not this one. This is a city sewer. This goes under the wall. We don't worry about that. But if we were going through the wall, which is the majority of the new houses, because new houses are not usually made in the city, they're built in the country or in the suburbs, where there usually isn't sewers, would go through the wall, roughly about where that arrow is. That measurement arrow I put there, it's about the height of a septic system. Okay, so in this case, we're back in the city. We got city sewers. We go under the footing. If I didn't bring it out in the last class, stay away from the footing. It's very, very hard concrete, and you really don't want to mess around with that. You don't want any trouble with the building inspector. If you've got to like chip a little bit off right here at the bottom to bring a Y up like this to keep this floor clean out close to the wall so it's not a tripping hazard, okay, just chip off a little bit down here to bring your pipe up. Okay, otherwise stay away from the footing. All right, so bring your floor clean out up here, right? Once in a while you're going to find a town, we already talked about it, where they want it up higher, and that's something that I'm sure they'll let you know about. Okay, over here, coming across the floor. Now this is 3-inch right here, right? And this is 4-inch, right? So this, remember, was a 4x3 Y right here. I like to put those little marks, makes it a little easier to, it kind of highlights the fitting itself. There's one here and one here. And remember, we talked about this last week. Tricky fitting, 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. Never seen such a fitting. But again, on paper, we use them all the time. Right, but for this sketch, that's what you need. And this here, just carry it up and out. Dandy clean out at the bottom. Also, a couple of you knew this. This is a 2-inch line until it breaks the floor, right? I don't want to write it in there because it's going to get confusing. But until you come out of the concrete, and coming out of the concrete, if I was an inspector, I'd be looking for a 2-inch line breaking through the concrete. Otherwise, I'd have to take your word for it. And that's not the way we do business. So 2-inch would have to come through the floor because it's in the concrete. And then you can drop it down to 1.5 inches, all right, with 1.5 inch clean out. Okay, we're pretty much done with this stack here. Now, if you were to add something in the basement, let's say that this stack, you want to add I don't know, maybe there's a laundry tray here, maybe some other fixture down there, maybe a sink, maybe for a handyman who wants to put a sink down in the basement. You could add a sink, and a lot of people would do it and skip the vent, not legal. But let's say you want to add something in the future. I'm going to add this, I'm going to take it away. So let's put a sink in here, and we're going to vent it up until we get a 6 inches above flood level from this one, and then I can tie it back in. Okay? So that'd be a legal way to do it. Now, how would most people do that sink? Something like this here, except it skipped the vent. Okay, so the vent would be left out. All right, I'm looking for my eraser, and apparently I didn't bring it over here. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this because this is not really part of the sketch. But you could add something to it. I think most people, and I think some of you have seen this, what they would do is they'd add something in the basement and just put a drum trap on it. But that's not really the way to do it. Okay, so this stack here, we're all set. I think this here we've explained well enough. We did it the last class. Now over here, this sketch is actually pretty good. I came out of the floor. It looks like a Street 45, right into a 3x2Y, right? Nice and tight. And then a dandy right on top of that. So I'm trying to keep it down. I don't want to get it too high. The dandy is up here because if the dandy was below, it would kick this this laundry tray or clothes washer up too high, especially a laundry tray because that's a regular sink drain. But even a clothes washer, I found out the hard way many years ago. I had a clothes washer and I was trying to get it over a doorway. It was a difficult situation, and I did it. It actually worked for maybe a couple of years. Burned out the pump. And when the appliance repair guy came, he told me that pump really isn't designed to be pumping 6 feet. So as an experiment, when it was working again, I took the hose and lifted it. And when I got about 6 or 7 feet high, it was pumping pretty good. I had a bucket there, of course. But as soon as I got to a certain height, it just shut off. In other words, there's a certain head of water that it can pump. Beyond that, forget it. I must have been close to the limit. All right. And also the standpipe is, don't forget that. I'll write it over here. Standpipe, STAND. I'm going to erase this so you don't have to write it down on your sketch. Is 1830. We talked about that last week. Don't get it confused with this one up here. A lot of numbers to remember. Okay, the standpipe is 18 to 30. Now, if you had the dandy below it, you're looking at what? 8, 10 inches, maybe 10 inches at least, that it would be higher up in the air. Don't want to go too high. So that's why I put the dandy up here. Okay, I'm going to take this out. This whole thing is balanced. If you hear a big noise and this disappears, you know what happened. It fell. All right. So we come off here with a 3x2Y, a 45 right here, 2x1.5 inch Y, and we come up to the dandy cleanout. The future vent, which could be, I like a dandy cleanout. I know we talked about it. Whatever your boss does, that's the best way to do it. I like to put this as high as it can possibly be that you can get at it. That way, if anybody wants to run across the ceiling to this, they don't have to duck in. If they duck in, down and in, you can't have it inspected. So keep it up as high as you can. Again, you put it where your boss tells you. But if you're doing it on your own, that's how you do it. Over here, this is a 3-inch TY. Somebody mentioned Estabrook last week, I believe. And Estabrook is just a family of fittings where you have a TY with an extra tap in it, or more, maybe a double TY with a side inlet. This one here would be a regular TY with one side inlet. And it does make it, those of you, I think you're all familiar with this, but if you're not, look at the outlet, have it facing you, and left, right. Okay? Sometimes it makes a difference. Sometimes it doesn't. But be sure you get the right one. And remember, this here does not really jump up. With the vent on it, it could. In real life, like this one, with no vent, it absolutely cannot jump up in the air. It's running at the same height as a water closet. We just can't show it like that because it's one line on top of the other. Okay, but getting back to this one here, we covered everything on this. I believe we took this one right up and out the roof. Now up here, most of you guys are probably using elbow right here and a TY, which is actually better. The reason it's better is the code doesn't really care. It can go in any direction, whether it's a TY or a Y. The problem is that with a Y, you got to hit it right on the money. Right, with a TY, you just come up and into the stack. So that's probably why you're going to see an upside down TY at this point. But for a sketch, I believe they show it like this, but it really doesn't matter. This is up in the attic, of course, or at least 6 inches above flood level. Remember that? So I'm going to make a note. I'm going to erase it. flood. Here's the eraser. Flood level, okay? So this here has to be 6 inches above the flood level for this sink. So if the sink is where my finger is, there's got to be 6 more inches before the vent ties into the stack. They don't want the vent below flood level because that way the vent, if there was a blockage, the vent could end up with water in it and could be sitting there, okay? But anyway, that's what the code calls for. Remember what I said? When you drill vents in a house, always start in any room at 42 inches and go up. Remember, vents are like draining uphill. So your lowest hole is 42, and you can never go wrong because that's 6 inches higher than a countertop. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Okay, now as far as the stock list goes, you can take the stock list we did and really just add to it. Okay, so everything you did on the stock list, you can kind of double it right here. You can have all the same fittings again because you have the same sketch. You just wrote it again. What is new are these lines in green. I will go through them. Now, like I said, in real life, you're probably not going to individually vent. I might suspect that most, if not all, of your bosses are not doing this. They're doing a wet vent, which is a lot easier. We'll get to that another time. Okay, so this one I will cover with you. And when we go live, you can, you get any questions, we'll talk about it. All right, let's do right here. This is a 2 by, let's see, what size vent do we need? All right, the vent, I'm going to draw it in red just to be highlighted. This vent right here, down to the toilet, all right, has to be 1.5 inches, half the drain size. These other ones, the green ones, what's left in green, these are 1.25 inches. Remember, minimum to code. Don't let that fool you. I know you're working with 1.5 inches all day, and all of a sudden you come into night school and surprise, it's 1.25 inches. Oop. I'm saying one thing and writing another. Okay, let's change that to 1.25 inches. Okay. All right, so 1.25 inches for this little piece here, 1.25 inches for this piece right here, down to the shower, right? A 2-inch drain, 1.5 inch drain. So half the size, but not less than 1.5 inches. Lost my P-trap here. Okay. Okay, real quick. This here is not too, it's a little messy. This would be a 1.5 inch Y right here. It's so tight I really don't even want to try to put the marks in it. So it's a Y coming up, and then you're going to have a 45 inch and a half going up. So 3 by 1.5 inch Y, 1.5 inch, 45. This would be a, let's see. This would be 1.25 inches. Excuse me, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches by 1.25 inches by 1.5 inches, because you'd have to stand it up to get the size. So 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, TY. Good luck getting that one. All right. That's about the only tricky fitting on here. This one here would be 1.5 inches by 1.25 inches, TY, 1.25 inches, 90. Down here, this would be a 2 by 1.25 inches Y with 1.25 inches, 45 and a 90 here. Okay, see if you can make a note of that. Okay, now a couple of things that I want to cover on here also. Let's see, remember now, just a refresher for those of you I had last year in class, I'm sure you remember most of this because we did this several times, but for those of you I didn't have, remember the floor level is just higher than the footing. Usually the footing is at the same height as the gravel. So when they pour the floor, it covers the gravel, and at the same time it covers the footing. Okay? 3-4 inches depending on how much concrete they put down. So it goes right across here, but we don't draw that in. If it helps you, you like to draw that maybe a light line for the floor, go right ahead. Each of these water closets is the best way to tell how many floors you have. So just count up water closets. And of course, that's roughly at floor level. I know it's just under the floor, but close enough. Now, a story height, I don't think we talked about, not this year. Really, who cares? But the book does. A story height is usually, I think everybody agreed, 10 feet, right, in a building. So you get a 10-story building, it's roughly 100 feet high. The code says 8 feet is the minimum. All right. So you add, you take out the height of a floor joist, 2 by 8, 2 by 10, probably more like it. Your ferrin, your sheetrock, flooring on top. You're looking at about at least a foot. And, 7-foot ceilings, other than maybe on the second floor, you don't see too many houses with 7-foot ceilings, maybe an old house. Usually there's somewhere close to 8 feet or just under. So this 8 feet is a little bit on the low side, right? A house is probably 9 feet. Not that we care about that, but the book does bring this up so that they recognize down to 8 feet. That is it. Okay, I don't think we've talked about this. Concrete walls. We haven't talked about, this is actually a good time to do that. And I think I have enough room here, so let's do that. Let's start with that concrete. They're 8, 10, 12 inches thick. Okay? The majority of them that I've seen, I believe, have been 10s. 12 I've heard, I don't think I've seen this. They can do a 12 and skip the footing. But look at the footing. The footing is about twice the width of the wall, and it helps spread the load out, right? Even though the footing is quite heavy, it doubles the area the weight of the house is carried. So it is a big help. I've heard that a 12-inch wide wall, 12-inch thick, has enough, acting like a footing, but I can't say I've ever seen it. So plan on a 10-inch wall. And again, just for your information, on the top of a house, top of the wall, looking like that, you'll have a 2x6, right, on top of the concrete. And they call that the sill. All right, now I'm not going to go through the whole house, but for those of you who don't do many houses, there's a few things very basic you should know. And under the wood, it's usually 2x6 pressure treated. There's a sill seal. And I believe that came along in my time, because I don't remember that when I first started. If you've ever been in an old house, you get a lot of draft coming on between the 2x6 and the wall. In old houses, this is usually maybe a 6x6, a solid 6x6 with a draft under here. And this is a stone wall. Any houses built before about maybe 1940, they have stone foundations. Go in any 3-family house in Fall River, they're all the same. They all have 2-foot thick walls or thicker. And they've been usually cemented to fill or mortared to fill all the holes. But up here, it's tough to get a tight seal. New houses, not a problem. They got a nice little cushion called a sill seal, which I think some of you guys told me you used to wrap your pipes. Okay, now a little bit about the concrete. This might save you a little bit of grief. I know now when you go to do a job, it's, when and where the boss wants to do it. If you have a choice, as soon as they strip the forms, now some of you do probably mainly commercial, so you might not have been aware of this. The concrete, it's called green concrete. If it hasn't set up yet, if it hasn't reached its maximum hardness, okay? How long does it take for green concrete to become maximum strength? 30 days. At least that's what they told me when I was in an army school one time studying concrete. Okay, so it takes about 30 days for it to reach maximum strength. Now, those of you who jackhammered walls or drilled them out, you're probably familiar with this. Your best bet is when they strip the forms after several days, The concrete is not hard yet, not rock hard. It's hard, but not that hard. And you can, if you got to chip it out with a chipper, you can. If you're lucky enough to have a coring machine, I've never set one up. I guess you can. I've seen them set up to go vertically, but not horizontally. But I've heard that they're out there. Some of you guys have them. It's a nice gadget. But if you have to chop through it with a electric hammer, try to get there early. Also, the strength of the concrete. This is also something I learned in the Army, and it happened a few times to me. Once I really got burned. This concrete here in a private home it's okay. It's maybe 2,000 pound test, so it's 2,000 pounds per square inch, and it's good enough. It's good for this. It's obviously not the concrete they use on bridges. That's like super hard concrete, and once they mix it up, the truck that they loaded in has a timestamp when he brings it to the bridge site. This happened in Jamestown. I remember reading about it. When they bring it to the site where they're going to dump it, if it's over, I believe it was 90 minutes, they had to dump it right on the ground. It was so critical that concrete be in the form within 90 minutes of it being delivered. The stuff in a cement mixer, the drum just keeps going around. I'm sure they just throw a little more water in. I mean, you've all mixed mortar up. So this concrete's not too hard. When I once was a building inspector, only once I had to get involved with the strength of the concrete. Some work in Little Compton, and they took a sample. It looked like a coffee can where they could like pop the latches off, and you had a concrete plug as big as a coffee can. And another time I was at a laboratory with the kids. We were on a field trip, and they actually had a laboratory where they tested the concrete. They took that cement plug and put it in this humongous press, and of course there was a lot of safety with thick glass, and they pressed it until the concrete exploded, and that's how strong it was. So it had to meet a certain standard. All right, so every once in a while they take a test on a job where the concrete is critical. But at this level here, not a big deal. I've never seen anybody take a test. Now, getting back to the green concrete, it's much softer. It's easier to chop. Some of you guys know that. One time, when I first started in business over 40 years ago, I was borrowing my father's electric hammer. It was a Milwaukee, but it was a dog. We both admitted it. It was one of the few Milwaukee tools. It's terrible. And I was trying to chip this wall of a house. It was my job. I was in business, and I had borrowed his hammer. And I was getting nowhere. I was maybe an inch, 2 inches into it after a long time. And the owner came by, and he started laughing. And he said, "Hey, kid, you having a hard time?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know, there's something wrong with this hammer." He says, "Nah." He says, "I got special concrete." And I think it was 4,000 pound, which in those days I didn't know what that meant. Now I know. He got concrete in excess of what he needed. What it meant was that whoever had to drill it paid the price, and it was hardened. It wasn't green. I didn't get there until after it had been poured for quite a while. So I ended up doing it by hand. Anyway, you don't normally see that in a private home. So remember what green concrete is. That other is nice background. You really don't have to get involved with it. And the thickness of the wall is, again, nice to know. Now, there's some places where you're going to see walls made out of brick. Not so much in this part of the country, but there are places where they have walls made out of brick. And if you've ever worked in Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard, they don't have concrete walls. They have maybe a footing. And these walls, even though they're multi-million-dollar houses in many cases, this is cement block. Right, the concrete is, I guess, just is too expensive. It's when I worked out in Nantucket about almost 40 years ago, a little less than 40 years ago. The concrete was about twice the price it was here. I don't even know how they did that. I think they must have mixed it out there. I'm not sure. So usually you're going to run into solid cement walls, but occasionally, you might find something else. Okay, coming inside again. Let's come across the cellar. The future vent right here. We did talk about it last week. I like a dandy clean out. I didn't mark that because some inspectors are looking for something else. They want you to put a TY, drip it back into the stack, big production. Whatever you or your boss or the inspector wants, what you do. And this vent stack, there's no requirement how close it can be to the main stack. It's usually pretty close, like this. Okay. And let's see what else we got on here. Okay. Now I'm going to take this and add another floor. All right. I'm going to change this to a wet vent. I got to make one change on it. So I'm going to see if my tech support, my wife, can send you a copy of just this here. So here's what I'm going to do. Leave the kitchen sink. I'm going to move the vent through the roof up one level. So this does not change at all. Let's do this. Something like that. Okay, so same thing. And 2-inch just for 1 foot. And then this is 1.25 inches. Okay? That's it. So in other words, there's not even another fitting. Nothing changed. This one, a little bit different. We're going to take this, extend it up. Okay? Now remember what this is called. This is the main stack. You have to have at least one, and it's 3 inches minimum. Okay? Gonna, like I say, leave that bathroom. Get rid of this. And we're going to carry the vent stack up and bring it up into the attic. No different. No different at all. Okay, now whatever space this was, like this, try it again, about right here. Okay, here's our 3rd floor. Now in your book, I don't remember the page, somewhere around, oh no, look at the end of your code book, and there's diagrams, maybe about 10 pages of diagrams. And they show, probably to me, the best sketch in the book is this one. This is individually vented right here. This one here now becomes a wet vent, which we're going to have to do more with. I'm just going to give you a real quick introduction to it. And the top floor will be the same as it was. This is the stack vented. So the stack vent goes from here to here. Okay? So this went up here. Okay, the problem is that I have to change one thing, just one. The tub cannot tie in like that. Okay, the tub is going to tie in over here. Tell you what, let's change color. Do the tub in red. Okay. Okay, and we're going to come off the tub with a vent. Ooh, too close. And we'll tie it in up here. Going to jump over the stack like that. And I don't know what kind of fitting that is, but let's change it. Okay. Now I know most of you have worked with wet vents, but for those of you who haven't, if there's anybody out there in the class, a wet vent would take off as soon as you can after the water closet, TY. After you get done with the water closet, the next fitting would be this one here, right? And that would be a 3x2Y right here. I'm pointing to. Okay, this 3x2Y right here has to be 2-inch. So even though I've only got a tub and on there so far, that's a 2-inch line. It has to be not less than 2-inch. All right, the reason they let you get away with a vent and a drain together is because it's oversized. So what I'm going to do also, one thing, I'm going to stretch this out a bit. You don't have to do anything right now. Just sit back and watch. Okay, let's bring the tub out to make it a little cleaner. All right, this last stretch here would be 5 feet from what is the vent, okay? So the vent is, instead of the stack vent, now it's going to be a wet vent. So this is going to be 5 feet if it's a tub, 6 feet if it's a shower, because this would be 2-inch. So I'll make this 1.5 inches because it was a tub. But only the black line is 1.5 inches. All right, the rest of it in red is 2-inch. Now when I come up, I can't have the lav tying into the stack like that because the stack is wet now from above. So we're going to have a lav coming in right here. Or it could go on the other side. It doesn't really matter. My 2-inch line a little too close there. Okay, so this would be a 2x1.5 inches TY right here. All right, this would be 1.5 inches up to 5 feet long, this black line here. Again, this would be vented by this line rather than here. Okay, I suspect for those of you guys that do new houses, your boss probably wants to do this whenever you can. Look at how much cleaner it is in this one. This has got three vents going up. This has one. Much cleaner. Also, I'm not going to do it here. We don't have room. Let's say they want to finish the basement and put a bathroom down in the basement. You come off here, and I think when I've asked the survey, the students have never told me they individually vent. Everybody always wet vents if it's coming through the concrete with vents. It'd look like this, but under the floor. Now, there's one thing to remember. Brings another point. How many toilets on a 3-inch line? 3 maximum. Okay, this is a big one. If you do 4, you got a problem. Now, can you imagine doing this, putting one in the basement and having it call for an inspection? Now what do? Rip it out, I guess. If it's not being inspected, that's another matter. But legally, you can only put 3 on one 3-inch stack. Okay, don't forget it. Very common test question. So in the future, if this house needed another bathroom, the only way it could be done without ripping this entire thing out would be to put it in without a permit, which I am not recommended at all. When you're working off the books like that, I think if, let's say, something went wrong and there was an investigation, I suspect the insurer would be looking for an out, and an out would be a job that was not properly permitted. Okay? So be careful when you're doing under the table, off the books, whatever you want to call it, leaving yourself open for trouble. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is make this sketch yourself. Draw your own version of it, okay? And see how much of the stockless you can do. Okay? And that's it. I will see you live on class time. you tell how many minutes it was? Is Kate still here?